Verse 8. Look to yourselves that you lose not those things which we have wrought, but that we receive a full reward. Second John, verse 8. You do not lose your salvation when you have fellowship with the wrong folk. We need to understand that very clearly. But you do put yourself in a dangerous position. I have started describing it like this. Well, if you got a snake in your house and you can't kill the snake, you can't put the snake outside the house, then you keep your eye on the snake and know where it's at all times and keep your family and you away from the snake. But you don't have anything to do with the snake. It does mean that the minute you and I identify ourselves with a cult or go off into this type of thing, which denies the deity of Christ, we have lost our reward. There will be no reward for a believer who has done this. Every believer ought to be working for a reward, to be able to hear him say someday, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 21. At the end of your life, Paul was able to say, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept my faith. Henceforth is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give him in that day. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. This is Paul's swan song, and we covered that tonight. Celebrate Recovery. I talked about how my wife's friend died last Friday, and at her funeral, I was thinking that she had finished the course. She had ran a race. Actually, it's not this verse; it's the preceding verse we read tonight about running the race. There's a cloud of witnesses, and so I said that she had finished the race before us. During this life, he wasn't sure of it, for he said that he didn't want to be disapproved when he came into the presence of Christ. Therefore, it will behoove us to be very careful not to be taken in by deceivers. Verse 9, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ has not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. 2 John chapter 9. The word transgresseth is a very interesting word. In the Greek, it is proago. Ago means to go. Pro means before. Proago means to go before or to go ahead. It should be ahead of. But anyway, therefore, the meaning here is not so much to transgress as to go farther than is right. This is the meaning that Thayer gives in his Greek lexicon of the New Testament, to go further than is right. Whosoever goes farther than is right, that is, goes to some extreme. This is what the Gnostics claim of themselves. The word Gnosticism means knowledge. The Gnostics claim to have a little more knowledge than anyone else. Sometimes that made them super duper saints. There are a few saints in that category today. They feel that they have something the rest of us don't have. Every now and then I get a letter from some person who tells me I'm lacking something. I recognize that I am, but I don't feel they are the ones to tell me, because they tell it from the viewpoint that they have it and I don't. They feel like they are super duper, and they manifest no love for the brethren, which means they are not abiding in the doctrine of Christ. This is the thing that characterizes them. See, the problem is whenever you practice religion, you become self righteous. You think you're better than everybody else. In my Southland, there were a group of people when I was a boy who were known as holy rollers. I attended several of their meetings when I was a young fellow just for the entertainment. I watched them roll, and they actually rolled. Yet they preached the gospel, and many of them were real believers. Bishop Moore of the old Southern Methodist Church was at the conference of Methodist preachers where he was approached by a young country preacher who asked Bishop Moore, "Do you think the Holy Roller will go to heaven?" The bishop replied, "Well, they will if they don't run past the place." It seems to me that is the condition of which John is speaking here. Whoever goes further than is right, whoever becomes an extremist and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ, hath not God. That's what I was talking about, is those who are dogmatic uh, one way or the other. There's dogmatic liberals, dogmatic conservatives, fundamentalists in religion and in politics too. When you become an extremist in either viewpoint, then you are in trouble and stay away from it. I was reading some time ago about several theologians in the East who met with a group of preachers. Together, they came to the conclusion that they no longer needed the answer fundamentalist on the question of the virgin birth uh, of Christ or the deity of Christ or whether Christ died for our sins. They feel like they have graduated from that. I remember that was one of the guys who runs one of the rehabs in the area. I remember him saying that, well, Celebrate Recovery is a good starting point, but I've kind of graduated from that and, moved on from that. But it's a good starting point. But anyway, kind of reminded me of that whenever I heard that last night. They have become highly intellectual, totally uh, satisfied, and have reached the uh, summum bonum of life. They are now up at the apex, looking down on the rest of us poor folk who believe in the deity of Christ and his death for our sins. To my judgment, they have transgressed, abide not in the doctrine of Christ, and have not God. No wonder they came to the conclusion that God was dead, but he wasn't dead. They were dead. God is in dead in trespasses and sins. See Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 1. Whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. If you are abiding in the doctrine of Christ, you have God the Father, and you have God the Son, and you have access to the Father through the Son. We have access to God through Christ, but his marvelous infinite grace, if we abide in the doctrine of Christ, the word abide means to remain. This is a permanent arrangement. Someone told me that he had asked a liberal preacher in Los Angeles years ago what he thought about me. This liberal preacher is an outstanding man, a very fine man in many ways. I have always respected him because he is one of the few honest liberals I have met. He just came out and said, that he believed practically nothing, and he stuck to his guns. I simply feel he should not be in the ministry. He is sort of like a man selling fuller brushes who doesn't have any brushes to sell. This liberal preacher said, well, I respect McGee and his viewpoint. The thing is that it's old fashioned and he hasn't changed in many years. He apparently hasn't grown a bit. May I say to you that it is about the nicest compliment a man could ever return to me because I haven't changed. And intend for it to be that way. John is saying here that he who abides in the doctrine of Christ or remains in it and does not change has both the Father and the Son. And that concludes section verse